Welcome to the Pod of Inquiry, the podcast for human optimization and understanding. I'm really excited about today's guest. He's truly an icon in integrative oncology, Dr. Nathan Goodyear. We have a fascinating conversation today talking about repurposed drugs in the use of oncology, IV vitamin C versus oral administration, and some general landscape discussion just on the overall totality of cancer. I think you'll find this episode extremely informative and beneficial, so please enjoy this conversation that I have with Dr. Nathan Goodyear.
Welcome to the Pod of Inquiry. Ready for some thought-provoking cerebral whipping and the destruction of ridiculous medical dogma? Want to shift those stale, moldy old paradigms? Well then, don that thinking cap of yours, get down in the cave, and join our host, Dr. Stephen Barrett, for this week's episode. Let's start spelunking.
Welcome to the Pod of Inquiry, the podcast for human optimization and understanding. I'm very honored to have Dr. Nathan Goodyear here with me. I just had a great podcast interview with his colleague, and that was Dr. Jason Williams from the Williams Cancer Institute. And so I wanted to follow up. Dr. Goodyear, thanks for joining us.
No, always a pleasure, Stephen. Did Dr. Williams tell you that not only did we work together, but we actually sat next to each other for 2 years in medical school?
Well, he did not, but what I thought was there was a definite Louisiana connection. And I guess one of my questions for today was, you played football. Did he play football with you?
No, he didn't. He was a kicker. He was the smart of the two.
Okay.
But I think it was high school. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think he played college, but I definitely know he played high school, but he was a kicker. I played center. So,
okay.
I always like to say the center is the smartest person on the offense, definitely on the offensive line. But, because we got to know what all those four guys around us are doing.
Right.
But playing college football really, it was a big part of my life, and it really taught me how to work well with others and to really push.
Yeah, it's a tremendous amount of discipline as far as all of the training, in addition to getting through, the rigors of the academics.
Oh yeah, there was definitely not a lot of free time.
For sure. So Nathan, tell the audience how you got to where you are now, because you guys are doing some very innovative, and I don't want to use the word disruptive, but I think disruptive is kind of a compliment to what you all are doing as far as how you're approaching cancer and, trying to shift the paradigm a little bit. So how did you get to where you are today from back in Louisiana?
Well, when I was primarily a gynecologist, pelvic floor surgeon by original training. And so when I got out of my training and got into private practice, it was very clear that the outcomes that we were taught wasn't necessarily uniform. So I began to say, okay, this one size fits all approach is not working. I got into the integrative movement very, very early, 2006, was full on integrative medicine for many years. In fact, until I was diagnosed with a tumor of my own, a pheochromocytoma. It's a rare adrenal tumor. And for me, that was the switch point, because at that point, half of my patients amazingly were cancer, because they were wanting adjunctive therapies. They were wanting to help what their oncologist was doing better. Their oncologist didn't understand what they were doing on the side, so they wanted guidance. So for me, that was the turning point. So I moved out here with my family. I actually had a business, left it, and came out to Arizona to run an integrative cancer clinic. I've run two now for over 7 years. And then I noticed, Stephen, that what we're doing in cancer from an integrative perspective is truly exciting and truly extraordinary, yet we need innovation. Because just as conventional medicine can get lulled into the successes of the past, and maybe at times have confusion about who they serve, I saw the same thing in integrative oncology. So I stepped away from my leadership role at a clinic because I knew that I had to innovate. Now, when I stepped away, I didn't have a plan, but it just so happened that I had rekindled a connection with Dr. Williams. He said, "Hey, why don't you come work with me?" It's like, that's a great idea. And so here we are now, almost going on a year later. And so I've been in the integrative cancer space for close to 8 years, and I can truly say, Stephen, that what we are doing at the Williams Cancer Institute, it is the future.
Mm-hmm.
We're just doing it today.
Right. Now, before we get into the specifics of some of the therapies that I wanted to chat with you about today, how has regular oncology embraced or pushed back with what some of the things that you guys are doing? Because it seems to make so much sense what you all are doing.
Well, I wouldn't say pushback or accept. I would probably use the word ignorance. And so whether it's willful or not, many of them I think would probably just choose to not know. And so they say, I don't want to hear it.
Right.
And another part of that would be patients go, I'm not going to tell you because I know you don't want to hear it and you might fire me. Okay. So in most cases, there is a direct or indirect ignorance there. We are starting to see more oncologists that are at least, well, that's interesting. Can you talk to me about it? But even in those that are interested in the approach, there's still aloofness where they go, okay, that's fine, whatever. They can go to you and then come back. It's like, well, actually, this works together better.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I always tell patients, Stephen, is the patients are the force vector of change.
Right.
So change is happening.
Right.
Not because doctors are leading it. There are some doctors definitely that's leading it, like us at the Williams Cancer and others. But patients are the force vector of change. And so oncology is going to come on board one way or another, conventional. And so the past experience has been, no, they don't accept it. They'd rather ignore it. But patients demanding it, that's starting to turn that tide.
Well, I think I've experienced the same thing about 30 years ago, developed actually the first endoscopic procedures in the foot. And at first it was like I was trying to pull the arrows out of my back on a daily basis because this was so anathema to what was traditionally done. But then the patient outcomes, these patients would go and they would go back to their other managing physician or surgeon, and they would say, hey, I had this done and it worked. And all of a sudden, the outcomes started speaking for it. And I think that's what's, and advocating for these changes in these other, and I think that's what's going to happen, with this as more people, they get sent home from MD Anderson or Sloan, and they're given 3 or 4 months to live, and you guys are able to turn it around and not only extend their life, but extend their life in a less burdensome manner of all of the horrible effects of the treatment. Sometimes I think the treatment's worse than the disease.
Yeah, when you look at the way the current paradigm is, and we can go down some rabbit holes with some things you just said there, but it's okay, go through treatment. Treatment goes through the body to get to the tumor and tumors. So it's a systemic to tumor approach. Right. Literally, it wages war on the body because it turns the body into collateral damage. People go, what do you mean war? Nixon declared war on cancer in 1971. So yes, this is the only disease that's ever had quote unquote war declared on it from a government. But in that process, it's to get to the other side, hope you survive, then work to recover, then live.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, no. Let's target the tumor and live day one, because that's the whole purpose and intent of treating patients with cancer. It's to help them live. Why wait? Why not do it now?
Right. Well, you make some very interesting points about traditional therapy, such as radiation, chemotherapy, and surgery, as far as, and I discussed this a little bit with Dr. Williams before we got into the intratumoral care that you guys are doing. But talk about that a little bit, because I think you laid it out very well in one of your short videos about what those agents do as far as they promote aging versus reverse aging.
Yeah, so I tell people the obvious, I'll state the obvious, that the best answer to cancer is never get it.
Right.
And patients are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But beyond that, the best answer to cancer, it's the immune system. They're like, oh, well, wait a second. It's like, well, the immune system is the body's defense to protect against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So to touch on what you just said there, when you look at cancer, cancer is a disease of the aged. And people will go, oh yeah, 70s and 80s. No, 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 no. That used to be the case. Changing demographics are throwing that out the window. I mean, seeing a 26-year-old young girl with stage 4 breast cancer, that shows you how aggressively and abruptly cancer demographics are changing. It's starting. The cancer of today is not the cancer of yesterday. Not even close. They are two, I believe they're two different diseases processes. But we have to talk about the cell, the aged cell, because when you look at cancer, cancer ages cells around it. Because when it does that, it can control the environment around it. Cancer does nothing to create anything new, but it disrupts and adulterates everything around it. It's the great masquerader, and it leads cells to do things that they're not accustomed to do, to support it and not support the body. And so when you come in with surgery and chemo and radiation, beyond the damage that they do to the immune system, very evident, surgery suppresses the immune system. Chemotherapy damages the immune system. A lot of research suggests that may be irreparable. Radiation does the same. But then when we couple this with the fact that they age the cells more in a disease where it's already a disease of aged cells, this is not a case where two negatives make a positive. It's the case where two negatives accelerate the negative of that disease. So now you're accelerating the aging of the immune system, which is further exacerbating the other damages from the surgery, chemo, and radiation. I don't deny that chemo can shrink a primary tumor, but what research tells us, it can actually age the cells, damage the immune system, and allow it to spread. It's like, well, that's a problem because 90% of morbidity and mortality in cancer is when it does that. So we need to rethink the process of aging. And in fact, what we're doing at the Williams Cancer Institute, Stephen, is I don't want to say reimagining, but I think you understand it. We're reimagining the possibilities of what cancer treatment will look like and what healing can become.
Right, right. Well, and I think, from some of the stuff that I've been fortunate enough to listen with you guys, you're looking at not just a specific tumor or cell type. You're also looking at the human being as a canvas on which you have to paint these treatments. And if your canvas is horrible, you're not going to be able to paint a great painting, regardless of how great of an artist you are. And so, I've heard you talk about the gut microbiome and how you work with that. And I think that's really a fascinating thing. So it looks like, the word holistic is taken, out of context and used very superfluously, but that's really what y'all are doing, in addition to refining a technique that is intratumoral. So you're not having the systemic damage to get to a small area. You're able to get to it, and then you're maximizing the human in addition to that.
Yeah, so when you look at the concept of the systemic to tumor approach, I talk about we need innovation. We need an innovation of ideas, purpose, and practice. The idea of moving from the last 100 years, which is a systemic to tumor approach, to a tumor to immune activation to move systemically, it's an innovation of ideas that Dr. Williams and now us, as the team as a whole, are putting those steps to actually implement that into purpose and into practice that can basically build a legacy that is one that heals. And when you look at medicine is a blend of science and art. And what I would say about that is that science is the foundation. Art of medicine is the creative application of it. Right. But what's happened in medicine today is the standardization, the protocol, it's really disincentivized critical thinking. But our goal is to focus on critical thinking, to focus on innovation to help patients. Because until every patient is cured of cancer, and though that's not a scientific measure, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, no cancer, until that happens, we must not rest in the medical community. We must keep innovating. We must keep pushing the envelope because, first of all, our obligation to our patients demands it, and we should demand it of ourselves.
So have you, I guess my question is that it seems that regular oncology is like regular every other specialty. They get into their trenches. It's one cell type, one drug or two drugs. It's one orthopedic injury, three different types of fixation that can be used. And these folks, myself included, we get into these trenches where it's sometimes you lose sight of the whole, of what it is you're really trying to do here. And I think that's one of the things that you kind of flipped around a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, the whole intent with treating people with cancer is to help them live, right?
Right.
I mean, that's the whole concept. So this holistic concept, you're right, that word has been hijacked in a way and been marginalized. But what it's really meaning is just, hey, everything is not compartmentalized. It's interconnected.
Right.
Interconnected
Right.
for the benefit of the whole.
Right.
And so we have to recognize that is our ultimate outcome. Yes, it's greater than the cancer. It's that they live and they live well. Okay. Mm-hmm. Back from that. Okay. Now get rid of cancer. Back from that. And so it's that understanding of where we are in medicine and not getting fixated in this confusion about who we're advocates for, and understand that being innovation and being an innovator in the cancer space and medical space, I believe, is a requirement. Yes, there are those that just follow a protocol, but we have to understand that cancer is a complex process, understand it and move forward to actually heal it. And I think in those roles, we can look at a process like cancer that's so heterogeneous, meaning very different. I mean, people think we know everything about cancer. We know so little. Mm-hmm. But we know enough. A good friend of mine actually posted on social media yesterday, Sabine Hassan, and she actually made the comment is that double-blinded randomized placebo-controlled trials are not possible today when you consider the variability of the gut microbiome. She said, these patients are not the same. I don't care if it's a control arm or treatment arm. It's like, brilliant point. But now we even got the tumor microbiome.
Right.
So it's like, wow. So what we have once thought we knew about cancer, with new ideas and new innovations and new discovery, we have to take a step back and go, wow, this is amazing. This is complex. Okay, let's dive in again. So innovation should be a constant cycling in the process of treatment, particularly in cancer. And that's what we do at the Williams. We embrace that. And honestly, I think we thrive on it. And it's what brings our outcomes and our treatment strategies to the patients.
So you mentioned a term that you don't hear very often when you talk about cancer, and that's the tumor microbiome. Explain that a little bit for the folks that are listening.
Yeah, so when people are beginning to, this probably originated with the concept of a leaky gut. People go, oh yeah, I had leaky gut, so I have all these symptoms. But the gut microbiome is what most will recognize. It is the content of bacteria, viruses, fungi, biofilms, maybe even parasites, archaea, all that are existing in that, including metabolites in that environment, there being the gut. We know the impact of that can actually be the cause of systemic inflammation and type 2 diabetes. Now, so initially it was thought, well, there's a gut microbiome.
Before we continue with this great discussion, I just want to take a quick break to acknowledge this week's sponsor. I'm constantly exploring new avenues to enhance well-being and address any health concerns. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce you to an exciting supplement called Stem Regen, which I take daily and genuinely believe could revolutionize your health journey as well. Stem Regen stands out as a game changer in the realm of wellness. Crafted from 5 potent plant extracts, it boasts a remarkable ability to stimulate the release of your body's own stem cells from your red bone marrow. Why is this significant? Well, stem cells are the superheroes of our body's natural repair system. They possess the extraordinary capacity to morph into various cell types, aiding in tissue regeneration and repair. As we age, the quantity of circulating stem cells in our system reduces significantly, impairing our body's ability to heal and rejuvenate itself effectively. Stem Regen steps in to counter this decline by kickstarting the release of stem cells into circulation, thereby bolstering your body's innate repair mechanisms. Once unleashed into your bloodstream, these mobilized stem cells actively seek out areas of damage or injury, initiating the healing process. By incorporating Stem Regen into your daily routine, you're essentially empowering your body to tap into its own regenerative prowess more efficiently. I firmly believe that Stem Regen could be a valuable addition to your wellness regimen, especially if you're seeking to fortify overall health and vitality, accelerate tissue repair, or expedite recovery from injury or illness. This first of its kind stem cell mobilizer is changing the game in regenerative medicine. Don't wait to unleash your body's innate healing capabilities. Visit stemregen.co/Dr. Steven, that's with a PH, and use the code SBPOD to get a 15% discount off your first order of Stem Regen. Hey Spelunkers, we're thrilled to kick off Season 6 with a fresh new look and the most exciting content we've ever delivered. This season, we're diving deep into the fascinating world of human optimization and understanding. But wait, there's more. We're giving back to our loyal listeners with an exclusive giveaway each and every episode of Season 6. That's right, prizes are waiting just for you. So how can you join in on this fun? Well, it's simple. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and here's the magic touch. Comment, "Let's Spelunk" on any of our Season 6 YouTube videos to enter. Of course, please add anything else you'd like to your review. Don't miss your chance to explore, learn, and win with the Pod of Inquiry. Let's spelunk into the wonders of Season 6 together.
And now there started to be discovery that, wow, tumors have a microbiome of their own. And so these bacteria, viruses, fungi, they can be unique to a particular cancer type. And some even suggest they could be a way that we change how we identify tumors. We don't identify them by pancreatic adenocarcinoma, breast intraductal carcinoma, but we identify them as maybe a variant of what bacteria are present, because these bacteria or metabolites or the other components, biofilm, et cetera, viruses, et cetera, they can contribute to treatment resistance, or they can result in treatment improvement in efficacy. And there's even animal research, Stephen, that suggests the gut microbiome has direct connection to tumor microbiome. Now, this is pancreatic cancer, where these microbiomes communicate. There's even suggestion that the gut microbiome can seed the tumor microbiome. So that can be a means to promote aggressive behavior or to be used to target the tumor to reduce the cancer growth. We used to think that the brain was a sterile environment. Well,
Right.
the brain has a microbiome too.
Right.
So everything has a microbiome. And how that impacts the function, the immune system, and the health of that system in and of itself is a microcosm, but then what happens is it connects out to all these other systems in the body, and they intercommunicate. They're not compartmentalized. They are interconnected. In fact, that's a good picture and imagery of the holistic approach to which we try to work through treatment with our patients.
So that's kind of a good segue into what I wanted to kind of focus on today was IV vitamin C therapy. So if you have, I mean, and you'll talk about all of the unbelievable properties that vitamin C has, and we'll talk about some of the pharmacokinetics and dynamics and whatnot. But is there maybe some action of the antimicrobial nature of vitamin C that may be helping some of the cytotoxicity because it's addressing this tumor microbiome?
I think it depends on how it's being dosed, how it's being delivered.
Assume high dose IV.
Yeah. So what I would say here about that, Stephen, is a lot of people will talk about high dose vitamin C and everybody in their clinic's getting 50 grams. And I'm going, okay, Could that be high dose for some? Yes. Is it high dose for everybody? No. It really comes down to, what's the low dose, intermediate dose, high dose? What's the adjunctive dose? What's the pharmaceutical dose or the therapeutic? What's your intent for that? Okay. You can actually take oral vitamin C, epigenetically alter the, the environment of the gut microbiome and even the gut microbiome itself, but you will never achieve a true cytotoxic anti-cancer effect through the gut. It's impossible pharmacokinetically. Impossible. People will say otherwise, it's impossible. But if you want to directly deliver to the tumor, the best way up until lately, Stephen, has been the IV route, the intravenous route. And so in their research suggests somewhere between 1 and 1.5 grams per kilogram per dose, 2 to 3 times per day. It also needs to be duration. I tell people about 25 grams per hour if you're doing the systemic immune approach. Recent pancreatic cancer research published out of Iowa, where they actually added 75 grams, so it was a standard dose of high-dose vitamin C given 3 times a week. They actually checked plasma ascorbic acid levels. They actually improved overall survival from 8.3 months to 16 months, in addition to the GEMS RNA Braxane. So when they added the vitamin C, it doubled overall survival. So what that shows you is that's an adjunctive dose. Okay, so it's a combination dose. So maybe a lower dose could be required than 1.5 grams per kilogram, which is typically what I say is the cytotoxic direct anti-cancer pro-oxidative dose. But maybe that's if you're doing it alone. But there's no one cause of cancer. Paul Urich described the magic bullet theory, treating syphilis with salvaricane. That's where the actual original chemotherapy came from. One chemical to treat one disease therapy. But here, maybe the concept of cancer actually is there's no one cause of cancer. There's a multitude of causes that come together. There's no one treatment of cancer. There's a multitude of treatments that must come together. And so vitamin C best fits in that adjunctive model to help those therapies work better. So in an IV standpoint, yes, IV vitamin C has been shown to be antibacterial. That research goes back almost 100 years. It's been shown to be antiviral. Yes, that research goes back 100 years, polio. So the research on this concept of IV vitamin C being antibacterial, antiviral, anti-infectious, anti-parasitic, even it's great against tuberculosis. So it's like, wow. So why do more people not use it, not understand it? I think it's because of how it was maligned after you and Cameron and Linus Pauling really got into a little tiff with Mortelli, Cregan, and Fleming, what was called the Mayo studies, and where they really kind of, there was a great debate, and unfortunately the battle for the narrative was won by those who just didn't understand pharmacokinetics of vitamin C. So could vitamin C actually be impacting the tumor microbiome? It absolutely could. Do I know of evidence describing that? No, we have to be honest and say the limitations of the evidence. I don't know of that, but it makes perfect sense beyond its detoxification crisis, energy crisis. I mean, it decouples multiple pathways. So vitamin C is the flagship of integrative medicine.
So let me interrupt you a second, because I think you're onto something really important. And you mentioned the Mayo study, and I think that was 1985 that you had referred to, where they actually used a 10-gram oral dose. And so they weren't comparing apples to apples.
No, they were comparing apples to kumquats. In fact, Ewan Cameron, he was a Scottish surgeon. He actually published first on vitamin C in cancer before Linus Pauling. Then they joined forces and published 2 studies, 1976 and 1978, where they gave 10 grams IV vitamin C 2 times a week to these patients that were terminal. And they were able to show improved quality of life and increase survival. So then that created quite the stir, right? That's exciting. Wow, that's great. Right. Then these 3 colleagues came together, Mortelli, Cregan, and Fleming, collectively called the Mayo studies. They did that first study in 1978, and then they repeated it in 1985, another study, but it was oral. What was really interesting about it is they accused Ewing Cameron and Linus Pauling of doing the exact same thing that they did. They accused them of not really recognizing and understanding the science of how this therapy should be delivered for cancer treatment. When in actuality, Linus Pauling and Ewan Cameron understood IV vitamin C is different than oral vitamin C.
Right.
They are completely different. And it's the principle of pharmacokinetics, which, by the way, was understood at the time of that 1985 study as it relates to vancomycin. So the concept of that pharmacological principle was known. But what happened is they simply didn't recognize what today is obvious to everybody, even the non-science, that IV and oral vitamin C, they're different.
Right.
They're a different delivery, different penetration, different saturation. We can go right to a tumor with vitamin C. That's why I said I think IV vitamin C is great. Until now, we've got some animal research that suggests intratumoral vitamin C can be great. So we now can go right to the tumor, not worry about delivery because we deliver it ourselves, not worry about penetration and saturation because we do it ourselves. And so it really limits all the limitations of those other routes. But it's amazing because that was a battle for the narrative. And in fact, there's probably, I got to read you something because this is a fantastic quote from a book written about vitamin C, but you wouldn't recognize it from the quote. It says, quote, "The medical establishment has effected a political rather than a scientific closure on the debate, which reflects the extent to which the production, distribution, and reception of medical knowledge, and indeed scientific knowledge in general, are inextricably linked to power, both within the medical profession itself and in its relations with other social and economic groups." They were talking here about how vitamin C was taken off of the front lines by politics.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so what's been happening ever since is people going back to the science going, no, the science is there. You don't understand that the oral is different than the IV. And so we're just now, thanks to a lot of people's work, so many people that can be thanked and supported for this. I mean, one of my dearest friend, Paul Merrick, he deserves more accolades than anybody because of the push that he's made and the pushback that he's received.
Right.
Working to say, no, let's follow the science and let's see where the science leads. And we simply follow it. And guess what? It always leads us back to integrative therapies. And vitamin C is always kind of one of those front therapies.
So I got a question for you about intratumoral vitamin C. So Dr. Williams talked a lot about PEF. So
Yep.
that you would not completely destroy the tumor, but get a pretty good, response, knock out some of it, create some antibody response so that your own immune system could take over. Are you at the center actually adding intratumoral vitamin C, or that's not a standard protocol?
We are where it's indicated. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I would think it's indicated more than not. There's a 2015 article. In vivo is a mouse model where they actually injected 100 micrograms, 200 micrograms, all the way up to 1,000 micrograms, and saw that all doses led to tumor regression within 24 hours. Mm-hmm. But of course, the 200 micrograms was better than the 100 micrograms. The volume is an issue, of course, if you inject in that concentration with the other things that we inject. But what it's doing here, I would say there's probably some cytotoxic effect, but because of the lower dose and concentration, we're dealing more with an immune infiltration, immune support mechanism. And okay. So again, kind of an adjunctive. It's going to increase T cells. It's going to increase M1 macrophage polarization, increase in natural killer cell and natural killer cell activation. So it really provides the support to the immune system to see those new dead pieces of cancer cells, what's called new antigens or neoantigens by the radiofrequency ablation, not radiofrequency, pulse electric field, and creating the magic cocktail, if you will, where then the immune system, the power is harnessed and it's trained so that we get a localized immune effect, what's called a bystander effect, where the immune system gets activated, recruited to target the cancer, and vitamin C plays a role in that. But then also, the tumor microbiome, I absolutely think there could be a role in that. But then what's going to happen is this immune activation, it's not going to stay local. It's going to spread. That's what the immune system does. It goes out and says, hey, All you other friends and family members of the immune system, look what I found. Now get involved. And so that's what happens. It takes a time-spatial treatment, local and abrupt, and transfers that to a sustained systemic treatment of distant, untreated tumors.
Right.
And it's like, that makes sense. It's what the immune system does. Maybe we should quit harming it and seeing it as the problem, or just trying to push it out of the way and start using it more.
So if we go back to that Mayo study, it reflects to me the confirmational bias that we all have, and that, okay, here's a study that shows it's BS and we're not gonna use it. But it was a study that really is pretty erroneous if they're comparing an oral dosage to IV dosage. Am I interpreting that wrong?
Yeah, you said we're not comparing apples to apples. Well,
Yeah.
we're more like comparing apples to kumquats. I mean, we can't compare the two. The only comparison you could say is it's both 10 grams and it was vitamin C. But the difference in the delivery makes that much of a difference, because when you look at the gut, you have these 2-compartment pharmacokinetics, which means that it's very tightly controlled in its absorption with the sodium-dependent vitamin C transporters, where when you have a plasma vitamin C level that's less than 100 micromolars per se, about 70 to 80, what's going to happen, the gut's going to upregulate its absorption. The kidneys are going to downregulate its excretion so the body can elevate vitamin C because we can't make it.
Right.
If that plasma level is higher than that 100 micromolar, then just the opposite happens. It downregulates the gut absorption. It increases the renal excretion so that it can keep that vitamin C in the blood in a very balanced homeostatic level. So I would say that it's even worse than what you presented as bias, and you're correct, we are all biased. I think it was intentional, because what's interesting about those oral vitamin C studies, when you look at that book, they didn't release that 1985 study to Linus Pauling and you and Cameron to discuss and debate and discourse. They released it to the press.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why? Well, then all of a sudden, it put Linus Pauling on the defensive. And then what did Linus Pauling have to do? He threatened to sue. And then at that point, everything, people stopped giving money, donating, everything, they marginalized him.
Mm.
And so it was very much, I believe, a intentional, practical tool that, by the way, has been repeated time and time again when we look at repurposed medications. Right. And you look like ivermectin. Right. Ivermectin is the IV vitamin C of repurposed medications. Right. It's the same comparison. And it's like, oh, they used that before. They're going to use it again. And they did. And there'll be some other therapy that they'll do the same.
Well, we've seen a lot of that kind of, let's call it controlling the narrative just recently with the whole COVID debacle. And, it's absolutely antithesis to anything scientific whatsoever. And how many people just jumped on that boat and sailed away? It's astounding to me. And, And now a message from our sponsor. The power of ketones, your body's alternative fuel. The folks at Approved Medical Solutions have done it again. That's right, with their new Clean Ketones supplement. Imagine your body as a hybrid car capable of running on 2 different fuel sources. While glucose is your body's regular gasoline, ketones are like switching to an efficient, clean-burning alternative fuel. I would say rocket fuel. When your body produces ketones, whether through fasting, low-carb dieting, or intense exercise, something remarkable happens. These molecular powerhouses cross the blood-brain barrier, providing crystal-clear mental energy that many describe as enhanced focus and clarity. But ketones aren't just brain fuel. They're efficient energy sources for your heart, muscles, and other vital organs. Think of them as premium-grade fuel that produces less metabolic waste than glucose processing. Research suggests ketones may offer additional benefits: reduced inflammation, improved metabolic health, and even potential neuroprotective properties. They're particularly interesting for athletes seeking sustained energy and anyone looking to optimize their cognitive performance. The best part? Your body is naturally designed to produce and use ketones. It's not about completely replacing glucose. It's about metabolic flexibility, giving your body the ability to thrive on both fuel sources. Whether you're interested in mental clarity, athletic performance, or overall health, understanding and harnessing the power of ketones might be your key to unlocking new levels of well-being. Approved Medical Solutions Clean Ketone Formula contains nature-identical ketones. These ketones provide the same fuel as those produced through a keto diet. Approved Medical Solutions Ketone Formula does not contain sugar, caffeine, or 1,3-butane-diol, and they are not ketone salts. I've been using them routinely now and notice a minimum of a 10% increase in exercise performance. By diving deep into cutting-edge research and real-world applications with leading scientists and practitioners, the Pot of Inquiry illuminates the science-backed path to enhancing your mind and body's potential. You can find us on all platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please join us.
I think that's why a lot of docs initially were so, for me, I remember early on in the pandemic, I was numb. I was taking care of patients, running the clinic that I was running at the time, and I was numb because they were saying, oh, there's no evidence that ivermectin works. There's no evidence that vitamin C works. It's like, do you guys not read studies?
Right.
There's all these studies, in vivo, even human studies. Okay, and so there was some numbingness, and then there were incredibly courageous people, Pierre Court, Paul Merrick, Peter McCullough, that stood up and say enough of this crap. And so I think they broke the tide that others stepped behind them and say that's right. So I don't think all doctors just folded. I think quite a bit did. But what happened is it became more about circling the wagons and protecting the system than circling the wagons and protecting the patients.
Right. And then, it was demonized. If you even tried to take an ivermectin script down to the pharmacy, you were like considered a meth dealer or something. It was phenomenal.
Okay. I got into conversation with, I can remember it very intently. I probably didn't take the right approach with them because I've never called a pharmacy. And then this was one of the major national chains, and then been told no.
Right.
Excuse me, no?
Right.
What? No, I'm not filling the prescription. That's not your job to say yes or no. It's to fill it and make sure that there's no other medications the patient's on that there's not an interaction with. I try to do that, but they may be on medications I'm not aware of.
Right.
No, I can't fill it because we're out. Not just, no, I'm not filling it because. But that's what happened. And so it was like, whoa, this is different.
Right.
This is different. This is not about what's effective, what works, but this is about trying to control what is allowed to work and be effective.
That's exactly right. Well, you mentioned ivermectin, so I have to ask you a question, and it's something that we're seeing pop up more on social media now about parasites and intracellular parasites, and that's how ivermectin is beneficial for cancer and all that. What's your take on that?
Wow, we could probably do a whole podcast and series on that concept. When you look at the World Health Organization, irregardless of what you think of them, there's some work that they've done that's good. They estimate that 25% of all cancers are caused by infectious disease.
Wow.
Okay, cause.
Okay.
So that includes bacteria, Helicobacter pylori, viruses like hepatitis C, hepatitis B, and parasites. Okay. So when you look at these, their liver flukes cause cholangiocarcinoma. Now, we don't see a lot of liver flukes here in the U.S., but in Asian cultures they do, and they have a higher incidence of cholangiocarcinoma. So when you look at parasites, I think a lot of people, because prior to that, people have talked about viruses. Cancer is a virus. Cancer is a fungus. And I think people are misappropriating some things here, because does cancer behave like a parasite? Well, yeah, it grows within the host and eventually can destroy it. But is cancer an actual parasite like a tapeworm or a hookworm? No. What it does in the most cases, other than a few instances where certain parasites directly can cause cancer, doesn't mean it's 100% penetrating, but it can. The cancer hijacks and again utilizes pathways, inflammatory signaling. It uses the same mechanisms, and it goes, wow, look at that. I've got something over here that is a pathway that I could sure take advantage of. And so cancer can very much mimic a parasite, but in most cases it's not, but it's doing the same things, right? It grows, check. It evades the immune system, check. It spreads, check. So when you then look at the anti-parasites, it's not that they're treating a parasite that's causing the disease in most cases. There are some, but people are saying in every cancer is a parasite. There's not science to support that.
Right.
We have to be very careful, and we're obligated to do this. And so we can't, in the integrative space, fall trapped to the same mechanisms and failures that conventional medicine has made. But where these antiparasitics work, all the benzimidazoles, even things like Ivermectin, Mebendazole, and Fenbendazole, we can get on a different track with that because I'm really concerned about that. But Ivermectin is targeting those pathways. It reduces inflammation. Inflammation is the bed in which cancer lies. It's anti-angiogenic. Well, gosh, cancer loves angiogenesis. That's the blood vessel supply growth. It can activate the immune system and enable the immune system in the tumor microenvironment to go from pro-tumor to anti-tumor, taking a cold tumor, making it hot. It can actually inhibit proliferation, stopping it in the G1S phase. So it's doing a lot of the same things it would actually do, but slightly different than the parasites, but here it's doing it in cancer. The thing we have to recognize when you treat parasites with ivermectin, it's a very short-term treatment. But when you're treating cancer, it's a much more longer-term sustained treatment. So there's still information there we don't know should it be continuous? What's the exact dosage? Should it be a pulsatile? What's the right combination? And so in this world of precision medicine, which is the right treatment for the right patient at the right time, I think we need to approach things like vitamin C and things like ivermectin, because I really look at them as banners for both. We need to treat them the same way.
You mentioned something a little earlier in this chat about how the cancers today are unlike the cancers 30, 40 years ago or even in the 70s. You hear the term turbo cancers a lot now. What's your take on that? Spike protein?
Oh, it's real. It's real.
Yeah.
It's science at its basic core is just simply observation. Oh, look at that. Look what the cause was. Look what the effect was. Now let's do some studies to prove exact, causation or association. And I saw patients early on in the pandemic that were actually in remission they weren't vaccinated, but then got COVID. So this was early on. So more of the virulent strains, Omicron, et cetera. And their cancer not only came out of remission abruptly, absolutely abruptly, but spread like wildfire. Now, a lot of it, I think, is because of the immune disruption.
Okay.
And when you look at, I'm a little bit different than a lot of people. When you look at, there currently are recognized 8 oncogenic viruses that really are shown to cause cancer. And then there's some indirect, like HIV is kind of an indirect with Kaposi sarcoma, but hepatitis C can absolutely cause liver cancer.
Right.
Epstein-Barr can cause Burkitt's. I would say that SARS-CoV-2 is very much like an oncovirus. The question is it direct or is it indirect? But I think its primary mechanism is through its disruption of the immune system. So when you look at the spike protein, what I would say early on is that it's the spike protein, whether injection or infection, it doesn't matter. Because when we were early on told that, well, the injection into the muscle stays there, the spike protein doesn't leave. Well, we now know that's not true. Right. And simple assessment of pharmacokinetic principles should have made every doctor go, I don't think that would hold and stay in the muscle. It's right. Going to leak. It's going to leak out. Then what? Well, we now know it congregates in fatty tissue. Well, guess what? Reproductive organs, brain. We know it disrupts the blood-brain barrier. So we also know it disrupts the immune system. So, well, what does cancer love? Oh, it loves a disrupted immune system.
Right.
And so just on that simple level, there's so many others. It can reactivate other oncogenic viruses. It can actually trigger, oncogenic signaling, metabolic shifting. I mean, what happens in medicine is they go, well, we don't see all the dots connected. It's like, well, all medicine does today and all education does today is teaches us to collect dots. You can only understand really the true impact if you start to connect them. And we're not taught to do that today. So what we have to do is we have to start connecting them, because what's not going to happen is you're not going to see the medical establishment and the medical bureaucracy and governments come out and say, our bad, we were wrong. Yes, this virus does cause cancer, and we're going to correct this. They will never do that. Right. So we have to connect the dots, but we don't have to connect dots that historically have never been connected before. We just have to simply look at oncogenic viruses and go, oh, these 8 do the same thing. Look at this one. Wow, it's doing a lot of the same things. Do we have research to talk about viral immune disruption? We sure do. Viruses causing gut disruption? We sure do. And so it's like, wow, we're just building together the different blocks from other areas that have shown the same thing and just starting to come together to that same word, which is, wow, we're seeing cancer behave differently. It's growing faster. It's growing like a turbine. Oh, turbo cancer. And I jokingly said that, well, if we can't use an adjective to describe cancer, then like turbo, or maybe we could call it, a zippy cancer or something like that. I would say that to make them laugh. But the point is, we're simply describing what we're seeing. Right. And science is supporting that observation. That is foundation science. Now, research hopefully will start to tease out some of that. And when you look across all infectious disease, it's never uniformly penetrating, meaning everybody exposed to a vaccine, everybody exposed to the virus are not going to develop cancer.
Right.
But in today's time, we are seeing a rise in, a lot of cancer types that this virus, I think, is playing a role in. And clearly, exposure, the more number of injections somebody gets, there is clearly an observationally, from my perspective, a rise in the risk of what that is doing. And after all, the spike protein, people forget, it's one of the major 4 structural proteins that are there with that virus. That's a toxin. That's a toxin. And people go, well, yeah, toxins can contribute to DNA damage and cause cancer. That's right. Spike protein is a toxin. So you don't have to reach too far to start to put together some connecting dots that go, right. Well, that's interesting. But that's if we're allowed to ask questions, right?
Right. All right. So one last question before we wrap up. You mentioned Fenbendazole, and you said you had some concerns, and that's another thing you're seeing a lot on the social media platforms right now. So give me your take on that before we wrap up.
Yeah, 2 things. Let me touch on ivermectin, because there's a lot of people advocating for ivermectin over the counter, and I think that would be a mistake. Those risks are small. It can cause respiratory suppression. It can cause coma. And in fact, in ischemic heart disease, ivermectin can make that worse. Now, why is that important? Well, a lot of studies suggest that the number 1 cause of mortality in people over the age of 50 in the United States is ischemic heart disease. It's been referred to as a silent killer. Right. So if we leave it to patients to just dose themselves, Americans are going to take more of what they think is a good thing. Right. So how do we know we have ischemic heart disease? We don't, other than we know it's prevalent. So we're going to see a lot of patients inadvertently harm themselves. But with Fenbendazole, it's a little bit of a different take, because the research on Fenbendazole really is limited to lacking. It's really fascinating how that is taken off. Joe Tippins described his use of the Fenbendazole protocol, which was Fenbendazole with a compilation of other things in conjunction. He had received previous chemotherapy and then also received Keytruda. So that those are details often left out, but it was more in conjunction with the Keytruda, and he didn't hide that out. Other people did. But the actual research on Fenbendazole as an anti-cancer agent is limited. In fact, some of the earlier research in the late 1990s, early 2000s actually showed that it accelerated liver cancer. Okay, so when you look at Mebendazole, you go, wow, there's tons of studies that show that Mebendazole has anti-cancer properties. Even a few human trials, small, but yes, most in vivo. For sure, we have to understand the limitations. But actually 3 studies that actually looked at benzodiazepones as a class together. And in all 3, they found that mebendazole outperformed fenbendazole. Now, why do patients turn to fenbendazole? They turn to it mostly because doctors have turned their back on patients as it relates to repurposed medications.
Right.
And so that leaves patients to wander the wilderness on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, I can read about mebendazole and fenbendazole. It's like me saying, well, I can fly this F-16 on this computer game.
Right.
So the next time I get on a plane, I'm going to go to the captain and say, I got this. You get back in the back. I'm going to take this plane. They're going to arrest me and throw me off. Our job as physicians is to engage the patients, even if they ask a question we don't like on a topic we don't know. We are advocates for our patients and our patients alone. Mm-hmm. And we must walk alongside them. What I tell them is they're the star quarterback. Our job as the coach or the general manager is to put you in the best position to succeed. And so the research, we follow it. And if we look at the research, fenbendazole should not be something that we are advocating for our patients, because we have science that tells us there's another form that's better, that's actually FDA approved, that we actually have a lot of toxicokinetic profile studies that show it's safe and how to better dose it, how to even look at human equivalent doses. Fenbendazole, we have no idea. This is why I was just talking to a patient who actually started off fenbendazole, was taking 222 milligrams a day, and every 5 days was increasing the titration of the dose up to 888 milligrams twice a day. Did she have any evidence in where to guide her? Nope. She just figured she'd do it. What did she do? Well, she ended up with her LFTs above 2,000.
Oh,
hepatotoxicity. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, the good news is research has shown that will recover in almost all instances when that is removed. But I see this repeatedly with fenbendazole. People have no idea how to dose it. They're overdosing it. They're taking in other things that strain the liver. And in part, the conventional oncologists are not wanting to engage with the patients on that. So the patients aren't telling them. So they're giving them things that hit the liver. They're taking the fenbendazole at doses that nobody knows about what's the right dose with fenbendazole. And so it's all putting a strain on the liver. And then the doc goes, whoa, your liver enzymes are 2,000. I better stop this medication. Well, the medication may not be the issue. It could be what they're taking. And so we have a relationship that's fractured because they're not communicating.
Right.
But in part, it's our fault as doctors. I hold most of the responsibility on us. But here's the good news. We have plenty of studies to guide us on mebendazole. It was FDA approved in 1974. The first study looking at its anti-cancer properties was in 2004. Fenbendazole, it's not even FDA approved. We have no idea about its dosing, none. But mebendazole, we can steer it, we can guide it with more evidence. And so reach that first important goal of what it means to help a patient. First, do no harm. And if we're engaging and embracing a therapy like fenbendazole, that we have no idea how to dose it, we're not embracing that time-honored tradition of first do no harm.
Right.
So for me, it's like, whoa, we got a problem. And so I'm a little taken aback by it on social media. I engage on social media, and I'm always fascinating with that. But I think the reason why that is the case is because patients, they feel left
abandoned?
alone. Yeah, left alone. And so I turn the problem on us doctors.
Right. Dr. Nathan Goodyear, thank you so much. I could spend hours going down this rabbit hole with you because you have such a wealth of knowledge, and really appreciate you taking the time to share your expertise and insight with the audience. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. All we have to do when we want to follow integrative medicine is follow the science.
There you go. As you know, I'm passionate about learning new ways to address health concerns. Moreover, before I recommend any treatment or supplement, I always try it on myself. Today, I want to share my experience with Troche, I have investigated other phytocannabinoid formulas and found that, in general, they were not consistent or reliable in their results. What impressed me about the troche delivery technology is that each rapid-release tab is engineered to provide fast-acting, long-lasting, reliable delivery of phytocannabinoids to support your health and well-being. Many physicians understand the importance of using phytocannabinoids for physical discomfort, sleep issues, and mood. But if the formula is not reliable, most patients will give up, never experiencing the real benefits. I put this to the test on myself and actually tracked my progress. This graph shows my results for reducing stress. Troche is so serious about how well their product works, they partnered with People Science to provide the Troche Tracker health assessment application that lets you monitor your progress and works with you to accomplish your wellness goals. If you are a patient, click the link below and the patient button to register for Troche Tracker. Assess your baseline health metrics and receive a free Troche sample in addition to getting preferred patient pricing on all products. If you are a clinician interested in adding Troche to your practice, click the link below and then the clinician button to register for a wholesale affiliate account or go to the link above. I hope you all enjoyed today's show and got some truly empowering knowledge out of it. You can always follow up on anything we talked about in the show notes found at our website, podofinquiry.com. If you think you might have tickled just a few neurons inside that cerebral cortex, please spread the word to your friends and colleagues and tell them that they need to get spelunking. Also, if you can take a minute to leave a review on your podcast provider of choice, and especially Apple Podcasts, that would greatly help the show and be so appreciated, provided it's positive. And if not, then just keep your pie hole shut and stay down in that cave. Let's keep spelunking.
This podcast is designed for informational purposes only and does not constitute any medical or surgical consulting advice or imply a development of any physician-patient relationship. The opinions of guests who are featured on the show are not necessarily the opinions of Dr. Barrett or the production team. This podcast is owned solely by Barrett Medical and Surgical Media, LLC. While the show is highly oriented for physicians and healthcare providers, anyone interested in the improvement of human performance and understanding will find this a welcome goblet to sip from, or guzzle. However, no representation or warranties are made in any way whatsoever on this podcast for any products, techniques, or other things discussed. Invited guests are not vetted by the Pod of Inquiry for their qualifications and may have a direct or indirect financial interest in what they present and discuss on the show. The Pod of Inquiry disclaims any responsibility from anything taken from the show and used personally or professionally. It is a responsibility of the listener to perform their own due diligence prior to the implementation of any ideas, products, techniques, or anything talked about on the show.